Hi, welcome to Wichita Liberty TV. This is your co-host, Karl Peterjohn, filling in today for Bob Weeks, who will be back with us next week. We've got a special program for you today. I hope you will stick with us as we discuss an issue that may be a little bit out of the ordinary, but it's important for you, as for your property, for your economic future, and it relates to local government. And I have a special guest with us today, a former colleague of mine on the Sedgwick County Commission, Kelly Parks. Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV, former Commissioner Parks.
Well, thank you, Carl, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank the station for airing this segment.
Let me sort of kick this off a little bit, because you've got an extensive experience in law enforcement, public affairs, and you're president of an organization that many folks may not know about, but I think it's very important, Kansans Advocating Responsible Zoning, also known as KARZ. Could you talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up becoming president of KARZ after you left the county commission?
Okay, I would like to kind of start with my high school days, and I would go to city council meetings in Hoisington and be the only person in the room, and not even the press wasn't even there. And they would all say, "What's the Parks kid doing here?" You know, I was just going to learn and listen, and I guess it evolved into something much greater in my life, and it was a good experience. So I would urge all those youngsters out there that are thinking about going into politics, you can go to these meetings. They're open meetings, and anyway, I graduated from Barton County Community College and then did a year in local government and sociology at Fort Hays. They didn't have a criminal justice program at that time. And so had an opportunity to go to work for Great Bend PD, which I did, Great Bend Police Department, and then went to St. John as chief several years later. And then my last 17 years I spent with Valley Center Police Department.
And well, you were the chief for a number of years before you were elected to county commission in 2006.
Yes, 29 years, and during that time, you know, department heads in small towns always sit and watch the whole meeting. They're attentive at the whole meeting, and so I learned a lot, not only about
when you say department heads, that includes police chiefs.
Yes, police chiefs sit out there, and we listen to everything that goes on. So when it came time to campaign for county commission, I knew about bonded indebtedness. I knew about all those eminent domain and some of the abuses I had in fact seen in those communities of that, and it was a help to know that and to know how that works.
Well, the focus that you're currently involved in on the zoning side of it, zoning's very big with both the municipal and the county level, and here in Sedgwick County, the city of Wichita, we've got both city and county zoning, but it all operates through the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. And I think it's a little bit confusing for a lot of folks out there. If you could take a minute and talk a little bit about the differences between city and county zoning and some of the things that occurred while you were on the commission, and what the viewers out there ought to know if they've got concerns or questions about zoning.
Well, actually KARZ started because there was an overzealous county enforcement officer. Let me back up a little bit there. We zoning in our area, or in the area that we live in, was agricultural, and we didn't know any difference, and it had changed. And back then they didn't post any kind of a signage. They didn't mail individual letters out to the people when they changed to zoning. They printed it in the Derby paper, which I didn't happen to get at that time. But that was the official county paper. They put it in the Derby paper, and then they
and this is back before they were posted online too.
Oh yes, that was way before online. This was 95 or 96 when this went down and changed. But then the county changed that to rural residential, and that changes some things in what you can and can't do with your property. We had a neighbor that had a tractor that was disabled. Well, it was disabled in the front yard, so she got a warning from the the overzealous county code enforcement officer. Had another neighbor that had a flat tire on a car on Thursday, and the code enforcement officer came by, saw the flat tire on the car in the driveway on Thursday, and it sat there all weekend, and Monday he came back. They had been busy and out of town and whatnot, and they came back and saw the car, and so he cited them on Monday for having a disabled vehicle in their own driveway. So you can see that this, it wasn't spreading a lot of friendly education or telling people, you know, what the law was, but that kind of started in motion some of the things around that, not only in our neighborhood, but also north of Valley Center, where there was a gentleman that came in to see me after he had been similarly treated by the county code enforcement, and said, what can we do about this? Okay. So it wasn't necessarily fighting City Hall, it was fighting county government. It was fighting County Hall, if you will.
Okay, well, keep that in thought. We will be back to talk more about local government and some zoning and development issues with former Sedgwick County Commissioner Kelly Parks. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. This is your co-host, Karl Peterjohn. Sitting in the host chair, Bob Weeks will be back with us next week, but we're here with our guest this week, former Sedgwick County Commissioner Kelly Parks. We're talking about an organization he now heads called Kansans Advocating Responsible Zoning. Kelly, when did KARZ get started, and what was the gist for bringing this organization into place?
Well, about 1996, as I was saying in the previous segment, we had an overzealous county enforcement officer and some zoning problems that we didn't know that we were now zoned into other classifications. And in 96, about 100 basically farmers out in the county in the unincorporated area received either nasty notes, tickets, or registered letters saying that they had to abate their problem. And so this gentleman came in, one of those that was a victim in this, I call him a victim, came in and talked to me, and I said, well, let's fight it legally, let's do everything on the up and up and see if we can get some things changed. And we certainly did, but I had been looking in Hemmings Motor News. It's a publication that a lot of car enthusiasts get, and I saw in there about are you having zoning problems with your cars being outside? Well, this was an organization in Michigan. It's actually a national organization, KARZ, way before the Disney picked up the Z on the end of the cars. But anyway, the KARZ organization in Michigan, and I called them, and in fact, he gave me a lot of information about SEMA, which is another organization that's I don't remember the acronym for it, but there are several organizations nationwide. It's not just a local problem; it's a nationwide problem, and it's about property rights. You have the right to have certain things on your property as long as there's not creating a health hazard or something like that. And we can understand that. If it's a health hazard, we don't want that either. But just people driving by, looking and seeing things that are on your property wasn't what we thought liberty was, you know. So we fought and changed laws. We went to the county commission.
This is before you were on the commission.
Oh yes, this was back in late '96, and a few of the laws changed, but what they were doing at that time, they were printing it in a derby paper. They were waiving first reading. There was no mailings to the residents, and the zoning changes, quite frankly, were placed on that pesky consent agenda, which I think should be abolished anyway, but that's just my opinion.
Well, that normally was something that's just handled on a routine basis, and
Yes.
everybody kind of votes for it. Although there were some times when you and I remember quite a bit because I served a little bit longer than you did, where items would be pulled off the consent agenda and they would get talked about. But normally it was supposed to be housekeeping type items that didn't get the attention that wouldn't have the public interest that other items that were on the regular agenda had.
Yes, I know you and I, when we were chair, and at this point, Commissioner Ranzaw also pulls a lot of that stuff out, or pulled a lot of that stuff out when he was chairman. And things that really people should know about. But there were violations that caused this, and then we also got to the point to where we were going to Topeka as a group, and we actually started passing out little membership cards and took a membership fee at that time, and we would meet in various places, and at some of the meetings we had around 50 people at the meeting.
Well, let me ask you, Kelly, if viewers out there are interested in getting more information on KARZ, what's the best way to get in touch with the organization?
We have a secretary-treasurer, but we also, they can certainly call me, and I'm in the phone book. I know some of you
phone book, what is that one?
Yeah, don't have a phone book anymore. But actually, if you have a problem, one of our members did go up to county court, in fact, and hand out business cards that said if you're having trouble with county code enforcement, come to our meetings, and we now meet on the third Wednesday of the month at Spangles in Wichita.
Oh, which Spangles? There's several.
Spangles at Broadway and 54, or Broadway and Kellogg. Yeah,
okay.
Right there.
Okay.
And we meet in that back room, and once this airs next week, we'll see if that there's an influx of people. But we have had some people from local government try to infiltrate that, and we certainly have.
Well, it's open to the public. So.
It is open to the public. However, we're caution each other on what we're saying, to strategy and plans for our law change and who we're talking to and politicians.
Yeah, well, keep that in mind. We're going to take another break, and this is Karl Peterjohn for Wichita Liberty TV. Thank you for watching, and we're going to get into some of the nuances of local government and local zoning in just a minute. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. This is your co-host, Karl Peterjohn, sitting in for your normal host, Bob Weeks. He'll be back next week. I'm here with our special guest this week, former Sedgwick County Commissioner Kelly Parks, who is heading up and president of Kansans Advocating Responsible Zoning. But we're covering a lot more than just county zoning. We've got city zoning. We've got all the municipalities here in Sedgwick County have their own zoning entities, but Sedgwick County and the City of Wichita operate the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission together, and the zoning operation is primarily through that function. Kelly, could you talk for a minute about how that works, and if citizens are out there, have questions or concerns, what should they do?
Well, they can certainly, in the county where I live, I've had very good response from Richard Ranzaw, and his appointee to that's John Daly, and he's very responsive and
to the Metropolitan Area Planning
Yes,
Commission. Now,
yes.
how many commissioners are there on the Planning Commission?
I don't know at this point. I've been out of it about
Well, okay,
12 years now,
if all the vacancies are filled, there's 7 from the county and 7 from the city.
I knew you would help me with that, Karl. Thank you.
And the counties, commissioners on the county level, since there's only 5 county commissioners, we'd each basically have an appointee, and then there were 2 commissioners who the entire commission would elect. Wichita City Council, each council member and the mayor each have an appointee. And they meet monthly. It's a public meeting. It's broadcast on the city's cable channel. And it is an important step if people are going to be taking out building permit and building property. They've got to have the zoning set for it. And it goes to the broader questions, Kelly, in terms of property rights and rule of law. And you hear a lot about that these days. Are property rights and rule of law getting the attention that they deserve for citizens and being able to exercise freedom in the 21st century here in Sedgwick County and Wichita?
Well, I think that it's better than it was, in my opinion, that we've been more active. This group is certainly attributed to some of that. However, it's something that you need to stay on top of, because the people that are out there using swear words like blight and various other things, that what's one person's blight is not another person's blight, So it's a kind of I think that we certainly have a lot of work ahead of us, and we have to be vigilant on helping others that they're being abused. And I think, I think it's better than it was, but it seems like it's constantly coming back up at state level.
Could you talk for a minute about the difference between, and we can, let's talk about the state side of it, because we're talking about city ordinances, are we talking about county resolutions, which are the county equivalent of an ordinance, are we talking about state law?
Well, actually all of those. State law can override and let counties and cities do certain things that they weren't able to do before. They can set the premise for action, whether it be civil or criminal, to go in and go on property without a search warrant. They can, they've been trying to do all kinds of things like that. Now, when I was a police officer, always, if you were going behind a fence that said no trespassing on it, you had to have a search warrant. Well, some of the areas, especially in southeast Kansas, that had been vigilantly trying to enforce some of the zoning regulations, and primarily in the counties, have went to the state now and said, we want more power to go behind these fences, and we want to check out these things without a search warrant. And now I believe there's something new to me that from when I left the police business was an administrative search warrant. And I don't really, I'm still studying to try to figure out what that is. And it sounds like that may be a little bit unconstitutional to me, but that's my unbiased, uneducated, no Juris Doctorate degree.
But most of the enforcement on zoning, it's you've got city officials or county officials, and each municipality has their own separate code, and it may vary a little bit code by code. Mm-hmm. There's no uniformity, correct?
That's right.
And so that puts us in a position where it can be kind of confusing for the citizen out there. If they have a question or a concern, like here in Wichita or Sedgwick County, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, none of us in KARZ are practicing attorneys, so they can certainly go get an attorney if they need to make sure that their property rights aren't being violated. Also, they can come to the meeting and listen to the stories that other people have had and what remedies they've taken to get rid of the problem. And be vigilant, and when somebody's running for public office, make sure you know where they stand on this. This is a good, and I think you certainly proved your attention to this matter when you ran for office, as did I. And a lot of people like to talk with their public officials and get that closeness with them, and a lot of times they can do the job. But if you have somebody that's wishy-washy, or no, we're going to make those tractors with those flat tires be behind the fence and whatnot, then you shouldn't vote for them.
Well, on that Democratic note, please stay tuned. We'll be right back for our final segment of Wichita Liberty TV. Welcome back to the final segment of Wichita Liberty TV. This is your co-host Karl Peterjohn, sitting in for Bob Weeks this week. Our guest this week is former Sedgwick County Commissioner Kelly Parks and the current president of Kansans Advocating Responsible Zoning. Kelly, let's talk a little bit, because people who are confused don't understand. Kansas has an Open Meetings, Open Records Act. I know this is really important to Bob Weeks, and we've got a relatively weak one compared to many other states. But citizens out there who have questions or concerns, how can they fully implement, get information from governmental bodies, and how are they protected by the Open Meetings and Open Records Act?
Well, in fact, KARZ has educated a lot of people in the Freedom of Information Act form that you fill out to get information on things. And you can go to those meetings. If you see a potential violation, of course, the Attorney General can be contacted. And
well, a violation of the Open Meetings or Open Records
yes,
Act.
If you think there's a violation.
That's happened, and there's been
yes.
complaints. When I was on the commission, people said we were in violation of it, although that didn't happen. I know other governmental bodies, the allegations been made, and it turned out they were correct. Mm-hmm. In some other cases, fortunately not involving Sedgwick County while I was on the commission.
Yeah. And certainly what you can do also to combat some of this is go to the meeting. There were meetings where I thought that the county commission was going to have to adjourn because there were so many KARZ members in attendance. We all wore the same color shirt, and we went into the meeting, and we said we're mad about this and we're not going to take it anymore.
Well, that's interesting, because when the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission has a meeting and makes a decision, what happens then?
It goes back to the governing body where it originated from.
So it could either go back to the city council or the county commission,
right.
And they're the final ones. Basically, the MAPC kind of goes through it in detail and then makes a recommendation to the governing body, whether it's the city or the county here in Wichita and Sedgwick County.
Right, and you certainly need the MAPC and the or MAPD or whatever it is called now.
Metropolitan Area Planning Department.
I guess.
But you've got a commission that oversees
right.
the department.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
D follows C.
You certainly need something like that for zoning variances on how, if you're going to build a garage within 2 foot of your neighbor's property line and things. It's not that critical out in the county as it is in the cities, because you're a lot closer together. But it's a organization that needs to be there, but it also has to have checks and balances.
Well, let's throw out the checks and balance side, because open meetings and open records are part of it, and that covers obviously the governmental bodies, not just the planning department and the commission that oversees it. Right. And I think if people have questions on open meetings and open records, where do they go if they're of a concern?
I would contact you can certainly contact the Attorney General or the legal staff of, if it's something that's ongoing, contact the legal staff of the city or the county. I know both Jennifer and Eric would welcome
we're talking
input.
About the city attorney and the county councilor, respectively.
Yes.
Mr. Yost and Ms. Magana.
Yes, I'm sure they would welcome your input, and if there's something that can be corrected, that's probably a better way than trying to go onto the state and be divisive about it. But if it continues, that needs to be brought before somebody and investigated.
I mean, I think it's important for citizens to talk about it too, whether it's on talk radio, letters to the editor, to your local paper, and also writing your local official. And I think letters are better than email, because frankly, one of the problems that we had when I was a commissioner was sometimes you get electronic communications, you have no idea where they're actually from, if they were actually even from the state of Kansas, let alone outside.
Well, I can assure you, I wrote one just this week to my local paper, and it was in fact about open meetings, and so it was.
You had a concern about that, and one of the local races for county commission.
I did, and I saw something, and I think that the people should be aware of what their candidate stand is on this.
Okay, well, appreciate the opportunity, former Commissioner Parks, to
Thank
come
you,
in
Karl.
and talk and visit with us. This is Karl Peterjohn for Wichita Liberty TV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.